have the privilege of introducing our speaker. You've already heard from her, but I thought I'd give, for some of you who are new and maybe don't know Reverend Peggy, Dr. Reverend Peggy, she is not a stranger to this center. She actually started her career as a scientist, a computer and software scientist. So of course, that's why this teaching was drawn. She was drawn to it. She was already a scientist at heart. She has a BA in mathematics, right, which qualifies her to understand Ernest Holmes' writing. Okay, she graduated from the Ernest Holmes College in Orlando in 1995 and was immediately called to go be the spiritual leader and the minister for the Center for Spiritual Living in Ocala, where she served for 20 years, and then she retired, or so she thought. And then, very soon after, it was short-lived, she was called to be the co-senior minister and help restart this center. I think Andrew and I were talking before that it had sort of been taken over by some of the residents in the area, and they didn't pay rent. So it's come back, it's revitalized, and evidenced by all of your energy here today. So let's see, she taught at the CSL School of Spiritual Leadership. She leads a book group, and she and her husband live on Lake Kerr in the Ocala National Forest. So let's welcome Reverend Dr. Peggy as she talks about open your mind to wholeness.
The heart of everything that I believe about the teaching of the science of mind. I take it very literally and see it work in my life and for those who I pray for all the time. And so if I could give you one gift today, it would be for you to walk out the door with an up-level belief in wholeness, in healing, in the gifts that this teaching brings as we open our mind to it. So let me pull out some of my things. This I borrowed from the bookstore because at the last minute I thought of something to read. On my way here, it takes me a while, I'm 80 miles away, you know. So I thought, well, that's my favorite thing. I'm going to find a book at the center. I have also this thing called You by Ernest Holmes, talk about sacred reading. And then I have a wholeness affirmation that I keep on my altar and read regularly. And we will come back to that. I put it down front, but it'll be out of reach, so we'll just set it there. And one more thing. Oh, the Science of Mind magazine is in here. And also, how many of you were here for the White Stone ceremony at the beginning of the year? I attended two of them, one at Unity in Ocala and one at Ocala Center for Spiritual Living. And the one at Ocala Center of Spiritual Living, I felt called to write on my white stone, bringer of wholeness. For that to be my goal in life, that I bring wholeness wherever I go. And that understanding of wholeness. So I don't want to forget it. I'm going to put it back in my bag, but that's where we begin today. So if this hasn't gone to sleep, I can, yes, come to the top first slide. And then the second one, what does it mean to open your mind? So our title is Open Your Mind to Wholeness. What does it mean to open your mind? To open your mind means to, this is from perhaps ChatGPT or Google, I've forgotten which one. To open your mind means to be receptive to new information, ideas and perspectives, even if they differ from your own or challenge your existing beliefs. It requires letting go of preconceived notions and cognitive rigidity in order to learn and grow. The phrase can be broken down into a few characteristics. The first one is intellectual humility. If we think we already know everything, we're not going to be open to learn anything new, are we? Intellectual humility, accepting that you do not know everything and being willing to consider evidence that contradicts your current opinions. The second is active listening. engaging in discussions with a genuine desire to understand another person's point of view, rather than just waiting for your turn to speak. Oh, and I have the monologue possibility here on a Sunday morning, don't I? So you're kind of at a disadvantage in that, and you can't jump in there. If we were in a class, you probably could, and I've been at centers where people did heckle a lot from the audience, but I'm glad you're not doing that. I'm not hearing that this morning. Cognitive flexibility, the ability to adapt your thinking when presented with new facts or logical, persuasive arguments. And I'm hoping that's what I'm doing this morning, that I'm providing a persuasive argument. You know, Ernest Holmes, our founder, back at the beginning of his ministry, he rented a space and rented an office, bought furniture for it, and opened it because he had studied these principles and knew they were the truth. Only one person came in 6 months, and that person thought he was nuts. So after 6 months, he closed the office, sold the furniture, and went to work in purchasing for the city of Venice, California. But he was studying all along, and he knew this was the truth. And so one day, the city engineer walked by and saw there was a book of Thomas Troward on his desk, on Ernest Holmes' desk, and he asked him what that book was about. And some of you are in a class right now with the Roots class, and you're studying Troward, so you might be interested in this. The ideas, Ernest Holmes said to that engineer, would appeal to him because he was a scientific thinking person. And he lent him the book, and the man went home and read it. And Ernest Holmes answered questions for him when he came back, and they discussed it. And the man said, "Why don't you come to my house, and I'll invite some friends over, and you can explain it. You explain it better than I can get it out of the book." And so Ernest Holmes did that twice. And the third time, a woman in the group that was in the home of this engineer said, "I did a crazy thing this week. I rented a hall downtown Los Angeles, and you're scheduled to speak." Within a couple years, he was speaking every Sunday to 25 to 3,000 people. This teaching is valuable. People want to learn about it, want to put it into practice in their lives. We don't have 2,500 to 3,000 yet, but you know the teaching is worth that here in Orlando. And it's an interesting thing. Where would we all sit if we had 3,000 come next Sunday? We'd have to rent a theater too, but there are theaters open in Orlando, and you could do that temporarily. That was just a side note. Okay, so this, of course, is from Romans, a letter from Paul, St. Paul to the Romans. "Do not imitate the ways of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." That's opening our mind, isn't it? This idea that what we have to share changes our thinking. It isn't that our brain is changed, but maybe it is. It isn't that the one mind is changed, but that our thinking is changed, and therefore our lives are transformed, aren't they? So this is what I have for you this morning, is an invitation. An invitation to recognize your wholeness, to grow ever more understanding of your wholeness, so that you can get the results of being whole, perfect, and complete. How many of us in this room would like to experience greater wholeness in our lives? Would you like to be healthier? Would you like to have things work better for you? Because this works for everything. You know, the teaching of the science of mind applies to everything, even the repair of equipment in our home. Wholeness touches every aspect of our lives. So that's my invitation today as we move along. So what is wholeness? We can come to some definitions from online again. Wholeness is the state of being complete, unbroken, and undivided. It represents an integrated condition where all parts of a person, a system, or concept come together as a unified whole with nothing missing or damaged. And there's, from the mental and physical well-being point of view, in psychology and holistic wellness, wholeness refers to the integration and health of the mind, body, and spirit. And then from a metaphysical perspective, In many philosophies and spiritual traditions, wholeness is often linked to peace and harmony, and always linked to our oneness with the divine, isn't it? So, what if we're already whole, perfect, and complete, and we just forgot? What if that testimony of the world, be not conformed to the ideas of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind? What if we've been taught, because of our human experience, one big lie, and the truth of us is wholeness? I see some nodding heads. You already know this is the case. The world tries to point out what's wrong with us so they can sell us something, perhaps? What if what we have to do this morning is simply remember our wholeness and remember to remember it? Now, we know that there's no spot where God is not. Ernest Holmes says it. Nona Brooks said it. Charles Fillmore said it. It's a watchword of New Thought, isn't it? There is no spot where God is not. So let's use our logical left brain here this morning and think what that means. God is everywhere present. God is perfection. God creates wholeness, always. The universe is a thing of wholeness, isn't it? Ernest Holmes said, let's get to that quote and come back to these others. I love this one. If the universe were not perfect, it would have already destroyed itself. Think about it. It must be working perfectly. It's been working perfectly for billions and billions of years. God is everywhere present. So what does that make us? God in expression, whole, perfect, complete. Now I come back to these other ones. Here we go. So there's no spot where God is not, and wholeness must be our original nature. It must be the truth of us. We've just allowed ourselves to be convinced that something else is the truth. Our soul has never been broken. There's an essence within each and every one of us that has been untouched, depending on all the things that have happened in our lives. We've all been hurt. We've all known illness. Perhaps we've all been in an accident and known injury. But did we not always come back to wholeness? And the more we believe in wholeness, the further we come back to the remembrance of the truth of who we are as God, whole, perfect, and complete in us. So the mind that believes in separation, and this is what the media may be trying to do to us, and because of the history of humanity, looking at the facts instead of the truth with a capital T, we've been experiencing this separation from the divine. We've been experiencing this question, what's wrong with me? Now, I invite you to think back to your childhood. Were you ever put down? Were you ever asked the question, who do you think you are? By anyone in power in your life? Were you ever invited to think that you were less than whole, perfect, and complete? And were the examples set before you ones of less than wholeness? But that does not make them the truth, does it? The mind opening to wholeness asks, what wants to be loved here? Your song about love, Linda. Love is the way. And that was almost a rap, but it was to a tune. That was the closest to a rap I've ever heard coming from this stage. Our thoughts shape our experience. So when we believe we're incomplete, because it's done unto us as we believe, that's another premise of our teaching, isn't it? We may be based with the wholeness that God is, but we also have freedom to think otherwise. And in our ignorance and what we've been taught by others, we may very well come to the conclusion that there's something wrong with us and something that needs to be fixed. When we believe we're incomplete, we live from fear and separation. When we open to wholeness, now we live from connection and possibility. This is a big leap, isn't it? If we've been living our whole life believing there's something wrong, if that's what's running around in our head, that little monkey mind of ours, now the invitation today is to know of our wholeness. Open your mind to wholeness. Ernest Holmes also says the divine is already fully present within every person. If there's no spot where God is not, God must be within us, right? It isn't God out there and me separate from God. If God is everywhere present, and we take that literally, God is everywhere present, that means God is in every cell and tissue of my body. I mean, God's in my ideas, in my thoughts, in my emotions. We are immersed in the presence that we're seeking. We're reaching for something that we already have, aren't we? Thomas Troward, that's a picture of him. We have so few pictures of Thomas Troward, maybe only one. I don't know of another photo of him. Wholeness is the law of being. What does that mean to us? Wholeness is the law of being. Everything that exists has come from wholeness. Now, my favorite way of saying that is wholeness is the right of being. He says it's the law of being. I usually say wholeness is the truth of being. And it's a mantra that I say daily, and I wake up from my sleep in the morning saying it because it's been such an image in my heart. And I've continued with it through my life. And we'll talk about that later. Nona Brooks defines omnipresence means God's present at every point, which we've already talked about. And she says omnipresence means perfection at every point. So the potential of perfection exists right where we've got a problem today. So I invite us all to think of something that doesn't feel perfect and whole and complete right now. Something in your life that seems to be off, something that seems separated from the divine. It could be a physical challenge, and I have a couple of those myself that I have yet to heal. And yet, if we were to take this literally, omnipresence, God being everywhere present, that means perfection exists everywhere. But we've been given the freedom, and it's done unto us as we believe. And when we believe in less than wholeness, that's what manifests for us. As soon as we turn our attention over and over again to wholeness being the truth of being, or as Troward says, the law of being, now what are we inviting that's different? We're inviting greater health to our physical body, aren't we? We're inviting solving of problems at a global scale. We are inviting relationships to mend themselves, because this applies to every aspect of our lives. Let me tell you a little bit more about Nona Brooks. I love her, and maybe you've not heard of her before. She's one of the founders of Divine Science. And when I first was called to ministry, I was a teenager and knew no women ministers. So I didn't become a minister as a teenager or even go to college to become a minister. It was an option. It was not an option. I did not become a minister till I was 50. But the last 30 years have been wonderful being a minister, and I love every minute of it, you know? So the idea here, for me to have a woman minister be an icon in my life, made me want to study her life, and there's a book about her life, Powerful is the Light. She'd had a healing, physical healing with spiritual means early on in her life, and she became a woman minister in the 1800s in Colorado. So I love to study her and her words, and she loved the word omnipresence. And that's simply a fancy way of saying there's no spot where God is not, right? Omnipresence was the basis of all of her teaching. And here we are with this quote that I wanted to say earlier of Ernest Holmes: if the universe were not perfect, it would have already destroyed itself. And so we could come back to Ernest Holmes again and again and again. If you studied The Science of Mind and all the books that are around that he has written, we could keep reading till the rest of our lives probably, because he was a prolific writer. So what do we do? This is an icon that I thought was helpful. I asked you a question a few minutes ago. What's not working in your life right now? What seems to be not whole, perfect, and complete? This is the invitation to turn our thinking 180 degrees from what that seems to be to the truth of being, which is whole, perfect, and complete. And so, love has no opposite, but the opposite of hate is love, or the opposite of indifference is love. Wholeness has no opposite, but failing health's opposite is wholeness. So if we were to take that word wholeness and apply it to whatever in our life is the problem today, that's my invitation. And it applies to all these different things, to health, to abundance, to wisdom, to love, to joy, to order, to peace, to creative expression, to divine activity. It applies to everything in our life. And we could spend the rest of the day talking about each of those independently of one another and keep coming back to wholeness. But I'm also watching the clock, so we won't do that. The key is all is well. When we come back to wholeness, all is well. I'd like to read something. This is what I found on our lending library. You got two of those in Shellam Hall, 365 Science of Mind. It's daily guides for every day of a non-leap year, because there's only 365 of them. But for July 11th, I would love to invite us to get into a space where this rings true for us. And if, as I asked your question, you're not interested in a bodily healing and wholeness, to apply it to whatever part of your life does touch the question today about wholeness, and hear these words. Today I identify my body with the action of God, the radiant life of divine being. Today I identify my physical body with my spiritual body, claiming that they're one and the same. Therefore, I see that every organ, every action, and every function of my body belongs to the rhythm of life, is part of the radiant presence of the living Spirit. There's one divine circulation flowing through everything, flowing through me right now. There's one infinite rhythm at the center of everything. I am part of this perfect whole. There's perfect circulation, perfect assimilation, and perfect elimination. There's perfection in every part of my being, and wholeness and completeness. This physical body is a temple of the living Spirit that animates it, sustains it, rebuilds it after the image of its own perfection, and keeps it in perfect health, in perfect harmony, in perfect wholeness. As we do our sacred study, I invite us to find words like this that speak to our hearts, that invite us to claim the truth of our being, to know that wholeness is ours by divine right, and it applies to every aspect of our lives, to our love relationships, to the wisdom that we need at our job, to divine activity that takes place in our experience of life, in our creative expression, for us to know that that wholeness is at the heart of it. And because of who we are, divine spiritual beings, we have available to us this wonderful wholeness. It's always here as soon as we remember to remember. All is well, and there's ever increasing good. there's an affirmation that we'll do. But first, I would like to share with this is my backyard right now. I have a gazebo going up in my backyard. I've had a vision of a gazebo where my falling down greenhouse was for years. The greenhouse has been converted into nothingness. As a matter of fact, the only part that remains from my greenhouse where the metal covers of the benches are now in the concrete slab, reinforcing the concrete slab of my wonderful gazebo. It's going to get a roof. They're halfway done with it right now. But I wanted to share it with you because, sometimes we have these wonderful ideas and it takes them years to come to fruition. I've had this dream for years to have a gazebo rather than a greenhouse because in Florida, from December, January, February, March, 4 months, I might need to cover my plants in a greenhouse. And then it sits empty for the rest of the year. Spirit guided me to take this and have the workman that's building this for me create something that can be used as a greenhouse in the winter, but then the sides come off for a gazebo in the summer. So that's what that will be. And we're putting a plastic, a polycarbonate roof on top that's translucent. And y'all have to come out to Salt Springs where I live on Lake Kerr and see my gazebo when it's done. Invite you to come because that's how far it's gotten right now. So let's do this affirmation together, shall we? I open my mind to wholeness. I release the illusion of separation. I honor every part of my journey. Ever increasing good is mine. Let's say it again. I open my mind to wholeness. I release the illusion of separation. I honor every part of my journey. Ever increasing good is mine. And so it is. May I do one more thing? Because I didn't share with you what I have that I read regularly, my wholeness affirmation. May I read it to you? Take 1 more minute to do that. This sits beside my computer. I am spiritually perfect. Every organ, every action, and every function of my physical being is an expression of divine order. Wholeness is the truth of my being. There is perfect circulation, perfect assimilation, and perfect elimination. There is one life. That life is God, and I am that life. There is one life. That life is God, and that life flows through me joyously, harmoniously, completely, now and always. And this is the truth of you as well.
Thank you for spending this time with us on Spiritual Wisdom Weekly from the Greater Orlando Center for Spiritual Living. If this episode supported you in any way, we invite you to stay connected. Listen again, share it with someone you care about, or simply carry what resonated with you into your week. Until next time, take good care and keep growing in spirit.